Okay, so this is the last segment of our basic of astrology. I am in Spain. I thank you for your patience. And we're going to go through the last section of, as we have done before, the personal planets, which is, of course, the sun and the moon, and the interpersonal Jupiter, Saturn. If you have not watched them, you can do that on my YouTube channel, which I have under my name, Agneta Borstein. There's some other basic information too of the, I would say the basic information that we have gone through partly. And so today we go through the outer planets. So I'm going to start the sharing as we always do. We're going to do that here. And the basic of astrology. So as we know, then we start here from the beginning. So the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they are considered basically more or less generational planets, but we each have them in our own personal chart, which is very important because a planet, an outer planet, can make a strong beating aspect to your natal chart. So how I have suggested this section is by starting, of course, with Uranus. Uranus was discovered in 1781. He stays in one sign for 7 years, which is pretty fast. So throughout the zodiac wheels, he takes 84 years to travel through the 12 zodiac signs. 84 years old is a significant age when we start to look at people are getting older. And also there's a liberation. We know the basic word for Uranus, liberation, freedom. You can imagine when we're all at 84. He changed signs, and we're going to go through that more in detail soon, from Pisces to Aries, but just at the current time, which is 2021. He changed sign into Aries, from Pisces to Aries in 2011, stays in Aries and Taurus 2019, and will continue that until 2026. And in this segment, you're going to notice 2026 being an important time for humanity. So when we look at, of course, the chart never gets old. We can look at history, we can look at mundane astrology, which is more like world events, but also we also look at our personal charts. Anybody who has Uranus in Aries around 1927, it's going to be somebody that have a way of expressing themselves in a unique way. I decided not to do the shifts of, we don't look at just America, as you know, I never do often, but that's not the point of the outer planets, because it's a worldwide that those planets do change. So the 1927, if you find that in a chart, perhaps your parents, you know, somebody that you want to look into, that's going to be a person who has a sense of values. When Uranus goes into Taurus, 1935, we're going to find this more earth quality. 35, we might, you know, have that as a great depression, as in not politically, just observation. How did people get money? Taurus rules Venus in money, would be concerned those just 7 years when Uranus was in Taurus. Uranus in Cancer, mid-1949, has a more sense of the family connection, being able to survive and reconnect to feelings if you found somebody with Uranus in Cancer. Uranus in Leo is mid-1956. And so that has more about individuality, about the self, and being not selfish, as Leo could consider, but also creative, more about finding forces, finding a voice. Uranus in Virgo, 62, as we remember the 60s, which we will talk about too. Uranus in Virgo is more about, are we okay in the world news in relating to individuality? We might have to take care of ourselves more. There's more ways of looking at health or how we process our own individuality. Uranus in Libra, 1969, perhaps that would be more like I am somebody. I need to be myself. I need to reconnect to myself and my own sources. Uranus in Scorpio, 1975. The 70s, somebody born Uranus in Scorpio would have a more way of searching, commitments, being different, if you will. Of course, as a generational plan for 7 years, when Uranus is in Scorpio, you're going to still have a Uranian quality depending on, of course, the natal chart. So Uranus in Scorpio would be more somebody that would go into depth in the individual search for growth, personal growth, a lot with Uranus in Scorpio. Uranus in Sagittarius has a more way of looking, how was the school system? How is that for collective? For the 1980s, we did have, that goes into other cycles as in the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which we had at another class. So the Uranus in Sagittarius would be more about searching new ways of law. There could be a lot of individuality in relating to who have we become. I need my education. I need to learn what that is. So when Uranus moved into Capricorn 88, would be more, we find more stability in our lives. There is more about in 88, person who has Uranus in Capricorn would maybe need to have more success, more about achievements, more also in individuality in that aspect. Uranus in Aquarius, 1995, of course, Uranus belongs to Aquarius. So I wouldn't know, 1995 is not that long ago, but when you see Uranus in Aquarius, and you might find some other personal planets, that would be very important and interesting to watch how that person would be allowed to move into that unique individuality without any, unconditional freedom, unconditional control. Uranus in Pisces, 2003, personally, I feel that would be more about how we did start to see more about awareness, perhaps not already then 2003, but definitely coming very soon, would be people who are more into the collective as an individual, to reach out more in ways of expressing themselves from depth, perhaps. The meditation, yoga is more norm at that point. Alternative healing, way of living, more awareness of how we really start to see not just escaping, but being allowed to be ourselves with Uranus in Pisces. Uranus in Aries, 2010, which is very important because we all experience that, most of us. Uranus in Aries to me would be, we are more able to, or the collective in individuality, we have more hope about, we are somebody. We are allowed to heal. We are allowed to be different, if you will. All the different alternative ways, the LGBTQ society would be more coming out to be accepted in society. And of course, things shift tremendously throughout Uranus in any sign, but Uranus in Aries would be about individuality. And also in respect to the science, a lot of good new discovery with Uranus in Aries, because we have to survive. We have to be allowed to look at new sources. It's a fire sign. So when Uranus in Taurus came into that sign, Uranus in Taurus in 2019, we already see the change in individuality. there is more division, more uncertainty even, because Uranus in Taurus, we are here, that's finances, as in 1935. There is more concern about division and, again, individuality for those who are born during that time. So Uranus in Taurus has then entered in 2019 and will stay in Taurus until 2026, when he will enter into Gemini. If we foresee the way we talk, and the way I've used Zoom to be able to reach you, that's not even anything new. There is so much more technology, just even Uranus in Aries, the science, technology. So Taurus then could be, and it is, other planets we will see too, Earth. Pay attention to Earth. So there is that hope, which I always have personally, and I hope you do too, for the future of our own experience here on Earth, for children, for grandchildren, for the future of Earth. That will be very prominent in 2026, and of course started 2019. You get all kinds of examples that I had decided not to follow one person versus another, then we become politically involved. Humanitarian involved, Uranus in Gemini is very important. How do we survive? Uranus goes into Cancer, stays there until 2033. And some of our grandchildren are going to be here. And it's very interesting to study that generational part of Uranus in Cancer. We have survived. There is that climate change, which does have to do with Uranus because it's uncertain. We can take other levels, which we will see too, not just in climate change, just in general with that. So history and cycles are repeated according to human evolution. Always happens, always will happen. So we leave Uranus with unique individuality in a generational aspect. Neptune is the next outer planet. He was discovered in 1846. He stays in one sign for 14 years. So now you have that. It takes a longer time with the outer planets. So with that, it takes 164 years to travel through the 12 zodiac signs. Neptune changed signs prior 1849 to 1862. In the respect to the not political part, there was a civil war in America. But America is not all that counts, even though it's a strong and powerful country. He moved into Pisces in 2012, and that is his own sign. So in his own sign, you also feel home. But with the water, as we know, Earth consists of 2/3 of water. And so far, we do know by science, Uranus, that the water is rising. So he's pretty upset at this point. When he moves back into his own sign, he goes, you gotta be paying attention to the waters. Some countries don't have clean waters. We are very fortunate, those countries that have clean water and can drink water. But then you come into the drought. And that is very important for us all to acknowledge and respect. That will also, Neptune will stay in Pisces until 2026. And we move on to see just in general that when the turn of the century, Neptune was in Cancer, 1901, and Neptune in Leo, 1915, mass migration. And we are experiencing that now through drought, through war, but also because people has become more international. So Neptune in Cancer would be home. I'm leaving my home. I'm forced to leave my home. But with Neptune in Leo, we start to see more about perhaps people find themselves more. Neptune in Leo would be a time that when you find somebody with Neptune in Leo, it will come again. All those planets every 14 years will be back again. So that's an individuality. Neptune in Virgo, 1928, we find that about again, was it anything that we find with Neptune in Virgo, was that a person that survived, that had to find out new ways of eating the crops all those things that comes with the earth quality of Virgo, the health benefits, all that start to be more aware. Neptune in Libra, 1940. That is an interesting way to see. Neptune in Libra would be kind of somebody that would really try to maintain a certain dignity, certain survival instinct. Neptune in Libra might have somebody, if we had grandparents at that time, survival, coming back into society, be kind to one another. That would be, eventually the war started, World War II, 42. But let's not talk about those world events, because we do find Neptune in Libra being a kind type of person. When Neptune comes into Scorpio in the 50s, 1956, then that's more about not just finding a spirituality, but I do believe that more people took, it's not that religion changed then, because it's always changing, and we're going to talk about that soon, but it's more about Neptune and Scorpio finding new ways of finding visions, finding new ways to connect to a depth in ourselves. When Neptune in Sagittarius stays there for 14 years in the 70s to Neptune in Capricorn, 84. That was very strong years for, I believe, going back to Neptune in Sagittarius, people are more free. We are able to travel more. We're able to have that higher education. And we find that somebody with Neptune in Sagittarius could be more creative as well. More writers could have been coming forth. Neptune in Capricorn, 1984, would also signify to me that we have more. 1980, of course, there was, again, Jupiter Saturn comes in between, but we're talking about more of the big search in energies when we look at the more outer planets. Yet we all have our outer planets in our chart as an individual point of reference. So in the 80s, the economy might have hit that somebody with Neptune in Capricorn. A lot of businessmen does have intuition. They just take chances, and that's part of maybe a new platform of economy came forth. Neptune in Aquarius, 1998. A little bit like, I don't really know, but somebody with Neptune in Aquarius would have more freedom of expression, more about finding ways of borders coming through, be free to again, coming into that alternative ways. It's a little hot here in Spain. As I mentioned, Neptune in Pisces, as I mentioned earlier, that's very significant because that's a long time for 164 years that process coming back to become aware of there's a change in us too. Now at this point in 2012, the Hatha yoga, the meditation is more common. We're not strange anymore because like meditate, so many people do it. And I love that yoga in every corner of society throughout the world. You see it everywhere. So that is a new awareness. And then we see again from 2012 to 2026, Neptune is in Aries. Are we really what we could consider, are we all in nirvana? Are we all happy? Aries is me. Not just me, Agneta, but did we come far with our vision? Who is right or who is wrong? Is there some way to say Neptune in Aries that we all had hope? And we do have hope, of course, that we know. So when we come back into Neptune in Taurus in 2040, then being that I am quite aware since way back when about climate change, and I have followed Greta Thunberg starting in 2018. So the hope, when I try to educate myself or try to be involved, what does Neptune in Aries mean in 2026? Have we all collectively, an individual, taking care of ourselves so that we can enjoy what we have reaped from 2012 and all be on the same page, if you will? And that's a very important point still when we come to the next outer planet. So Neptune in Taurus by 2040, that would be like, sometimes I hear this like, well, by 2030, the oil companies are going to change, they promise, and just the whole food supply. Everybody has to be vegan and everybody has to do this so that we will survive. And in that Neptune, what is real or what is not, it's so totally personal choices, especially now when we are in 2021. These years we will find too soon will be crucial, and we know it, not just in America, again and again. So Neptune in Taurus in 2040 might be that writing on the wall that we have survived. The earth is more greener. We have taken that Neptune in Pisces and we have cleaned. He's not ruling the water, he is the water. Neptune, we find him with a trident in his hand. He's churning when it's hurricanes, all these different water changes and the whole thing. Well, you know that and the part of that. So Neptune in Gemini, 2053, that's our future. We will know then how we have survived and evolved as we go again. Neptune in Cancer, here we go again. It's all repetition, and of course we choose to be born during crucial times, anytime really. This has happened before, but according to science, it's a crucial time for us to take care of the little bit. You have Neptune in Libra, for example. Then that might be something that just have to be like, I'm still searching, I'm still me, even if it's Libra, because Libra is loving everybody, but we also have to love ourselves to be able to survive all those years. And the next planet, next outer planet is Pluto. Now that's very interesting. He was discovered in Flagstaff, Arizona in 1930. And there was first one astronomer, Clyde Tombaugh, that started in 1915. And we are living in a very crucial time for science. And do we take care of the science in the outer space, or do we take care of Earth? That's not my choice to say or be right or wrong, because the planets, Pluto was always there, just not discovered. Just a sidekick, about 1970, we discovered, they discovered Chiron, 1970. So like, whoa, that's a new planet. We are still evolving in humanitarian aspects on all of us, individually as well as collective. So Pluto is a little trickster. I like this image of the first image that the NASA took of Pluto, and I love that heart, because Pluto, Scorpio don't have a good reputation, but when you are searching and purging and clearing, and is definitely churning with Pluto as it is in the basic class, birth or death. So he stays in one sign between 12 and 31 years. The average year is 21 years, but it's always unpredictable. You never know when he comes around. Now, it does take Pluto, that we know, 248 years to travel around the 12 zodiac signs. He changed already in Capricorn, from Aquarius to Capricorn, 1762 throughout 1778. And we know America was born 1776. So we take that into account, just your thought process right now. We're going to look at some charts, because as it is, America will be 250 years in 2026. Happy birthday. So when we look at the radical changes, Pluto and Gemini, when we take the turn of the century, again, from 1900 and into, I might as well go into Pluto in Cancer, 1913 to 1930. A lot of unrest. People migrated, never mind, a lot of European individuals came over to America. but it was also search inside of Europe. There was always migration and changes. So the home has to be given up to find a new home, and that is inside and outside. So Pluto in Leo, that is anybody born 1937 through 1958. That is again a generational planet, generational point, but many have, that's a lot, 1937 to 58, as we know that whole process. Pluto in Leo is me. So we talked about the Leo generation, that guy, I am somebody, I have to find myself. And then we go into opposite Leo and we talk about Aquarian age. And that's interesting because we're going to find that too very, very soon. So it's no matter how eclectic, how universal, how Aquarian agey we become, we still have individual roles to play. We still have Pluto in Leo in very personal planets in our charts. So if that would be Leo, that would be your own personal position where that would fall. So Pluto in Leo, in Virgo, 1956 to 72 would be more aware of, we are getting somewhere. 70s, 80s was more economically difficult for a lot of people. But Pluto in Virgo would be more about settling down, taking care of business, if you will, taking care of the new ways of looking at the new world, the new ways of looking at matters. So Pluto in Scorpio, 1983 to 1995. When Pluto is in his own sign, Scorpio, that's the first case, late 1983, but absolutely 1984 was the first cases of AIDS, which is a pandemic. And there is a cure, but it's also hard to live with it. So that reminds us that anybody who has Pluto in Scorpio absolutely has no way of saying that they have to pass because they have that. But it might be that generation between 83 and 1995 has been reminded, either a friend, relative, or circumstances around just living, intensity. Is there an increase of cancer? Is there more awareness of death? Who knows? Pluto in Sagittarius, 1995 to 2008, it will be more about finding hope, finding that there is a survival, there is a life after transformation. We often say with Pluto, it does not have to be death, but it has to be transformation. It has to change. And the harder the change is, the harder we resist the change, the harder it gets. So we have to transform. My favorite word for Pluto in Scorpio anyway is metamorphic changes and challenges, but also rebirth. Pluto in Capricorn, 2008 throughout 2024 is very important as we speak right now, because Pluto in Capricorn in our individuality, where do you stand? How do you choose? Do we have the right? Somebody was born, of course, somebody is born between 2008 and 2024. Will they be all controlled by government? I'm talking a little bit about transits, but this is the basic class. To say those born in there, are they controlled by the government, or who's controlling who? So when Pluto goes into Aquarius 2023, there's always overlap because Pluto actually is retrograded 50% of the year. So therefore, to the years, as I see now, they do shift into the ephemeris, where we find the planets. Pluto in Aquarius will stay there until 2044. But we still have that, 2026 as being an important year, because 2020, when an outer planet shifts, it takes a while for us to know in the collective, but individually, that's part of when we see where we have Pluto in our natal chart, and perhaps what it does to us in our natal chart. When we go back to see where the natal is at, where does Pluto in Capricorn stand at this point in your life? So Pluto in Aquarius 2023, 2024 to 2044 would be where we consider, are we really safe? Has the world changes? Absolutely. Are individuals changing? They aren't used to the new. They don't know what was in the 1900s, but they learned the history. And again, history evolves as individuality does. So Pluto in Pisces, do we have clean water? Because did I mention that? Like some say, oh, we have to save by 2030 is doomsday or not. So here we are again in 2021, crucial times. Pluto in Aries 2068, 2098, we can only imagine. Are we looking the same, dressed the same, individuality? We change so much, and we hear the grandparents of the grandparents' history, devastating incidents has always happened, they will happen. And how is that Earth, Mother Earth, if you will, observing that? Astrology and observation is not just one side of the coin. There's always two sides to a planet as it is to make choices. So Pluto in Taurus 2098 to 2021 would be perhaps average lifetime for us to come back is about 100 years. So we might see you again when Pluto is in Taurus. We're all good. Earth, Taurus. So let's look at some individual charts just to put it into action. Take out your own chart to see where Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto has fall into your chart. And I'm bringing up some of the charts that we have looked at throughout the class, because when you start to look at a chart, where do you start? There is a significant planet, I don't know if I'm going to move that down here, hi, that Rachel Maddow that we have talked about in the basic class is layers. Where's the sun and the moon? Where's her personal planets? They are up in the 9th house, and she is a professor, lawyer, so she's very strong in the 9th house. Why I want to share her, all her outer planets are between what we call the lower part of it, not low as in low, but the lower hemisphere. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th is more about how do we find ourselves, and the other planets are when we move out into the world. Not that it has to be a division like that, but why I chose all the outer planets in Rachel's chart is Uranus in Libra. I am somebody. I don't care. I don't know when she came out as being gay. She's been extremely successful to be herself as an, first, the degree, the lawyer, and then continuing the 9th house in higher education. Her voice is strong. It sits as people might listen to her, and many people don't. That's the division of Uranus. Neptune, Sagittarius, has called into that part of just in general being Neptune and Sagittarius already. Neptune, again, is in a sign for 14 years. So it does do very well to her 9th house, the way I see it at this point for her Aries planets. And then Pluto, I just went into Libra. So Pluto is in Libra saying, I am somebody. I just want love and I'm changing. And then when we see other aspects, which we won't go into right now. But I thought her internal process, internal growth really shows out in the public. This is what you get. Another chart to look at, as we have looked at before, Queen Elizabeth II, we have mentioned that she has a 0 Taurus sun sign, which is not what we're talking about there, but that's also very interesting. Any signs of 29 or 0, just because it's neither here nor there, but there it is. We had found her Saturn being in the top of her chart. And of course, that's the planetary ruler of her whole chart. She has a Capricorn ascendant. Saturn belongs to Capricorn, and she puts herself into a strong 95-year-old as now in 2021. Now her other planets, Uranus was 27 in Pisces, and now Pisces is very important at this time. And she keeps having what I consider, of course, is an extremely powerful monarchy. And some people are against it, but I wouldn't even know how to count outside Australia and how many countries the monarchy actually owns. So however way that's going to change. And the next planet, Neptune, is in Leo. So you find the moon too, that's me. So no matter what she went through in her marriage, in the divorces that was unheard in the past, she still kept her dignity. That's not just me. We just see that and Neptune in Leo and the moon in Leo say, I have to keep my cool, if you will, the dignity. And then Pluto in Cancer, being that it's just, in the sixth house wouldn't matter, but she still has a traditional role to play in a very changing society. And we have gone through some other points in it. I mean, outside her, we haven't gone through, if and when we continue this class, the nodes, the moon knows the karma, I've got to continue with that karma. It's right on her ascendant. Very interesting. The past is the south node. The north node on her angle in Cancer is the future. It was all set to be, if we believe in karma. So I thought we could also look at Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, because let's look at Prince Harry first. He's born 1984, is it? Let's see here. Oops, I went further than I should. Let's see. Let's go back. There we go. Okay. 1984. So Uranus in Sagittarius is about individuality, but I don't think it speaks so much with a 9-degree. But the Neptune, 28 degrees, eventually then will go into Capricorn. And then Pluto in Scorpio. To me, that is significant that it's 0 degree because it just went into Scorpio, as we mentioned in 83, 84. Maybe he just have to change the monarchy. Being married to Meghan Markle, then we have talked about her chart, but going back into just in general, we can talk a lot about Prince Harry's chart, but this is not the time for that. But if we just look at his fourth house with the passing of his mother, the psychology of it, having Neptune in the 12th house, where it wants to be, as we know, he did a lot of partying. That he has also recovered. And that's part of what I think that 0 Scorpio can do. It's like in birth, death, but we also survive and we change. And of course, the 8th house is also strong, but not out of planets. We're not going to talk another time about that. So Meghan Markle, with her born in 1981, her Uranus is 6 degrees Scorpio. So it has changed already, if you will. Uranus are going to move into Sagittarius, where she meets Harry. And Neptune also in the 5th house. Perhaps she had been married before Prince Harry and felt that I'm not going to have children with this person that she was married to before and divorced. But both Uranus and Neptune is going to be personal for her in the house of children. She's going to want to have children, but it had to be different. And when she did have children with little Archie and Lily, then it really changed not just her, it changed the world, the tabloid, but it also changed Harry to be more free to commit himself to himself, if you will. So her Pluto is in, the other Pluto, I hope so, is in the 4th house, 21 in Libra. We know that she got divorced, and a difficult divorce, identity with her father and her mother, biracial. But it has to change too. So I think in general, without going through too much in her chart, I think the whole process of evolution is very personal for her. Never mind going through the detail, but if we just take a quick look at the first house, yeah, she's a Leo with a lot of Leo, and individuality plays a big role. And the whole process of having challenges, Libra, as we might know, not the easiest sign. She's born during 1980 when Jupiter Saturn was in conjunction, as we had talked about in the other class. They become in the third house. Her mind might sometimes, because Moon is close to it, be about her. And we all have the right to say that. All we want is peace, but she didn't get that. When we look at little daughter Lily, she's born June 4th, 2021. Now we're looking at the future. Supposedly she can't be a little princess. I didn't look at Archie's chart because of time limits. But when we look at the future and looking at all those outer planets, this is a big change. As I mentioned earlier, some people don't want monarchy, they want what? Social Democrat, Republican, Democrat, what do we want nowadays? So this is way in the future, is the now, but she also represents something that her parents made a choice for her chart. Uranus falls in her individuality, of course, in Taurus, as it is now, in her ninth house. 9,000 does not necessarily have to represent just your higher mind, education, but different. Her mind, she will have to read in the history book about her ancestor, her where she came, and then it has to change. So her mindset will have to be Uranian. Neptune, as it is now, belongs in Pisces in her seventh house in Pisces, because that's where it's located now. And at times, I think, somebody might say, like her friends, I consider the seventh house the friends, 11th house larger groups, but the Neptune in that Pisces where it belongs to could also, there's a very good Jupiter in there, which, but who is she? Is she a princess? No. Is she a beautiful little girl? Of course. And so Pluto would then be late Capricorn, and it will change very fast in 2026. Where is she going to move? Fifth house is where we change our family dynamic. We have a home, and the fourth and the 10th house is that public. Where do I come from? Fourth house is the home. That's her karmic link, and she puts herself up in the 10th house as a Gemini. It's a very good way to say, who is she going to become? Because I think that I hope they don't have to move too often, but there's also that change in how she has to see the changes in evolution of what we then consider the new world. Swami Muktananda, born 1908. He happens to be my spiritual teacher for many years. So Uranus, the reason why I choose this is because he wrote a lot of books. He changed thousands of lives. Uranus in the ninth house, he came to America. He was born in India, Bangalore, India. No, he was born in a little other town. But point is, the ninth and the third house is quite strong in his chart. He knew he was born during a full moon. He took Mahasamadhi, which is when he transitioned into another state of his consciousness during a full moon, which he knows. Actually, he had an astrology that I also frequent way back then. So Uranus in the ninth house is foreign country. He did an American meditation revolution here in the 70s, came to America. And part of that, Neptune is also generational, but in his chart, Neptune in Cancer, he gave a lot, and his karma was so that he just couldn't stop helping and had heart problems at the end of his life because he helped too much. But thank you, Baba. So there's a lot on that generational point that he changed people's life. People are still talking about the kind of like spiritual awakening Shakti path that he gave, and the Siddha Yoga continues. His Pluto in Gemini, now that's very early, kind of like took on to in the conjunct Mars, but that's another story. But the part of that generation was, he was actually born in quite what's that called, rich family, that he just took off. He always regretted to his mother, but he did leave his family to just wander for 30 years until he settled in and created an ashram, which I have frequent too. But that's part of the whole knowledge still exists in this chart and in his whole being, if you will. I chose this part because generation, what is that? That is Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud, that are still there, and that they are still very respected psychiatrists, psychologists, and psychiatrists. Carl Jung, I think, had a more alternative ways of looking at just in general how people were changing a lot during their frequent encounters, and especially they eventually had a split. So with I like to start with Sigmund Freud because respect the elder. His Uranus is in the 7th house, and these are birth times, correct? And he identified himself a lot with his clients. Both of them, if we compare the 8th house, there was a lot of sexual issues and disagreements of dreams that eventually Jung kind of proved more in a collective and alternative ways. His Neptune in Pisces, as it was at that time, 1856, long time ago, but also because he has helped so many individuals with their dreams and their therapy of survival, healing. His Pluto had just went into Taurus at his birth, and that's also significant for the changes that are still occurring. His material is still respected. So when we moved over to Carl Jung, who then had Uranus in the 7th house as well, but in Leo. And that would be more, he was more free to be himself, actually. And Neptune in Jung's chart is then in the 2nd house in Taurus. So you have this Taurian quality in both of them. And that becomes what we consider a conjunction, because they are in Taurus, both Pluto, Sigmund Freud, into Uranus in Taurus in Carl Jung's chart. So you have this Pluto-Uranian quality, and two very still significant individuals for freedom of, I could just imagine what you went to therapy at that point. They did clinical work, but also Jung transformed that part of looking deeper into his psyche. This very interesting writing. Matter of fact, it's in my first book. He went through transitional and spiritual awakening, went to India and said, I don't want to have the holy man change me. I want to change. And he had a lot of interesting things. And if you have not studied the Red Book, which I have studied, is transformative. Yeah, it's a very collective. It's a collective individual that he showed us how that changes. So let's see here. It's just that in one class that you might have missed, you can see chart being unequal or equal. And I do believe that when we start studying chart, the equal house systems are easier. Just to say that this is how an unequal chart looks. Same Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. They stay in the same house, it's just that they become more larger or smaller. I chose Jacqueline Onassis that we have spoken before about. She's born 1929. Uranus in the 5th house. Her moon is in Aries in the 5th house. as we know, she had her children, and her son passed away in a tragic airplane accident that he drove. Point is that she had passed when her son passed away. She was very close to them. She lived for them. As we know, she is into the whole process of her President Kennedy being killed. And when we look at Neptune, right 0 degree in Virgo, changed right there in the 30s, 1928 to the 30s. It's like a mystery about her, because she kept, hiding with the glasses, which again, I don't have that in this chart because it was an old system, or I didn't change the setting. But her karmic node as Queen Elizabeth is also on her ascendant, Scorpio. And then she married some rich oil guy in Onassis, and he passed too. So then she had a long, many year-long relationship, close relationship with a married man. But they all knew. So that Neptune in Virgo on the top of the chart, even though she was trying to hide Scorpio ascendant, then Pluto comes the ruler of her whole chart. You go into the 8th house. With that on her personal chart, with Pluto in Cancer, that's just very sad. But I do believe, and I did write that in a book in my writing, that as we part, we know there's answers that are coming to greet us and help us pass. And it's just kind of sad when we look at certain things, but it's also very astrological, educational. So we'll see another chart. Pope Francis, in case that you wanted to know, he's born December 17th, 1936 in Brazil, I think Sao Paulo, at 9 p.m. That is a rectified chart, not by me, but that's what you find when you start looking at it. I kind of like his vision. I'm not raised Catholic, but I like his new vision for the new world. So he is a Sagittarius, and his karmic node is very close to his sun, but that's not what we're talking about today. So the Uranus is on the top of his chart, 5 degrees, had just moved into Taurus for a while and will eventually. So that would be, he is 84 years old now, and still, he had some kind of operation recently, I forgot what it was. But Uranus in the 10th house, he really doesn't care what people say about him. He embraces those who needs help. He embraces the ones that are different. He does not want to have the status that perhaps the Pope deserves. And so Neptune in his chart then falls in Virgo in the 2nd house. I don't think that necessarily have to be that he kind of rejects his status in many ways. He wants to live simple. When he worked on the street in Sao Paulo, he just was on the streets helping poor people, and he still does. He feeds the homeless. He opened some part of Vatican so that people can sleep in his home, as he calls it. But that also becomes important that Neptune is in the 2nd house. It's 1857, but the planetary ruler of that 2nd house does become his sun in the 6th house. And in the 6th house is where we do service. Going back to Pluto in Cancer, which then eventually in the 50s will move into Pluto in Leo, but it is in Cancer. Pluto in Cancer. So that also changes him in his personal vision about saying he almost didn't want to become the Pope. It's like, no, let somebody else do that. But here he was chosen, as we know, with the smoke. So then the next chart is part of that we have talked about before. I don't know so much information about her, but I thought it was interesting to look back at her. I was going to look up, how is her personal life? Maybe you know, and I don't. Uranus and Pluto in Virgo are quite close together. I know she was on her own. I think she had a child, and she says, we know the story with the the Harry Potter stories. She started writing the story on a piece of napkin because she was so poor in some kind of cafe in England. And that seventh house kind of fascinates me because there's so much there. We should probably study more about her. That whole, now she's one of the richest women in the world because she had the Virgo inclination of survival. This time, July 31st, 1965, 9:10 p.m. in Gate in United Kingdom is the right time. So it's a lot of Virgo, and when Virgo turns around, they become very intuitive. They come into Pisces. The role of that is like too much. They can see so much in this Uranus-Pluto shift or what has to be changed in her so she can change the world. It's her personal journey, if you will. And then Neptune in Scorpio in the 8th house, wouldn't know at this point what to say about that more than she does give a lot up to charity often. That's one thing that she has. And then you have these kind of karmic nodes up and down, but let's not go through that now. But that's her public down to where she came from. I don't think she came from I think she had a difficult childhood, if we will. Again, I should study more about this stuff that I share. So let's move on. Hilma Klint, 1862. This is before I finished this class. It's just because I have done a lot of, matter of fact, an article that I got accepted, if you want to read about a very interesting time of being an artist at that point in 1862. I mean, then when she was older, and her unique life story. And there's a very interesting point in this article that I wrote. Her Uranus is in the 7th house, which is her uniqueness. It took me a while. I had to read she's Swedish, born in Stockholm. And the whole process of her, who was she? She was not married, she didn't have children. And then I had to look at some Swedish articles, and she preferred women. How great at that time to be with a woman. She had 2 or 3 significant relationships in her life. And then being an artist, you couldn't be an artist if you were not really good, and she was very good. In my article, I talk about how she had the most successful exhibition at Guggenheim in New York, went there a lot of times. And so her uniqueness comes through Uranus. And then, of course, Neptune had just went into Aries. I am, just like Rachel Maddow, I am somebody unconditionally. My Neptune in Aries need to show who I am. And then you have the Pluto in Taurus, kind of like neither here nor there, but it does move into her Scorpio planets. So I'm going to finish this session. I thank you for your patience with the outer planets, and take a look at your own outer planets. They are very personal. So, oops. No, I'm not going to, just really quick, and I'm so sorry about this. It's so Pluto, as we know, there's two times for the United States chart, 2:13 a.m. or 5:15. I prefer the Gemini ascendant, or you shift it into a Sagittarius ascendant. After September 11, then a lot of people said, no, it has to be Sagittarius ascendant. I don't get politically involved, so I just continue having the Gemini ascendant. There's another story to that. But what we should really learn about our own individual journey right now in the next few years, Pluto will have a Pluto return. As we mentioned, every 248 years, Pluto has done its journey, and not just because he's totally erratic and unpredictable, he does come back to the United States chart in 2026. So that's a 250-year anniversary. But before that, in 2022, he has to come through 3 different sets of transits. And also at the same time, Neptune at the point right now is, or 2022 and now to is 22 degrees Neptune in Pisces. Opposite that, when we look at transits, sorry to throw that into you, and I'm sure you'll love it. is Neptune in Virgo in the natal chart. No matter where you put it, these are outer planets coming in to return to where it was when, I don't believe Christopher Columbus did discover America. That's history. They might even take it away to not be a public, it's like a national holiday, whatever. Like Christopher Columbus, of course, July 4th. But we live and we learn. So Pluto return, we have to make choices. The more we resist the change in whatever side Pluto has shown in your chart or in the chart of the United States of America, it has to be reborn. It has to go down to its source before it can come up anew. So in 2021, as I speak, that to me is February 2022, and it will take the whole year. There's 3 hits in 2022, and it will be finished in November, December 2022. And then supposedly 2024, Pluto will go out of Capricorn. As we can see in this image, Pluto is then in Capricorn, goes into Aquarius. And that is the part of the, I would say that, is there a new world? Is there a new age? It's just for us to do our little part to make sure we're not taken back of all the different basic words for Pluto in Scorpio. Pluto in itself, birth, death, Scorpio in itself, transition, transformation, and to end that word, metamorphic. I thank you for your time, and I'm going to stop sharing here. And please look at my YouTube channels. I hope to hear from you, and I'm going to send this out to you to your dedicated class. The reason last time was somebody was not well, and somebody was on vacation, somebody didn't hear the notes or saw the notes. So I do thank you for those that did participate. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you and be well and enjoy. Thank you.